welcome. You are in the Google Forms Part 2 webinar for Google for Education. This is part of our NOACA webinar series. This is a part 2 of the Google Forms Part 1. So we are going to talk about more of the advanced features such as making a quiz and some add-ons and some other different things. So we're going to go ahead and get started with our Google Forms Part 2 webinar. My name is Christy Hughes. I work at NOACA. I am an educational technologist and also a Google for Education certified trainer. I'm going to be your host for this webinar. I've actually been over at NOACA now for 13 years. Prior to that, I was an elementary classroom teacher, and I have 3 kids of my own that keep me pretty busy outside of work time. So our objective for today is we are going to go ahead and use Google Forms. We're going to look at creating quizzes. We're going to look at choosing your own adventure tasks. So that's a little bit different. We're going to use Google Forms to go ahead and do that. We're going to also look at creating lessons and then more such as the add-ons and some other different features. If you are unaware, and you probably registered for this webinar from our training.noaca.org website, but if you are unaware of this website, I like to point this out in our webinars. This is where we house all of our materials. So you're going to see right up at the top, it does say class materials. Down here, all these different icons, if you would click on these icons, they do go out to what we call a checklist. So within that checklist, there are multiple little instructional videos that talk about different things. So for instance, for forms, if you'd like to learn about, maybe if you had some other questions about Google Forms, such as creating a question or adding an image or something like that, you can go ahead and visit this checklist and view a 1 to 2 minute video on how to do that. And hopefully that will kind of coach you along. I also want to make note that we do record all of these webinars. So right up at the top, you'll see a button that says recorded webinars. We do record every single webinar that we've done. So if you'd like to go back and view a webinar that maybe you missed when it was recorded live or put on live, you can go ahead and click on that and you can go ahead and watch that webinar. So those are all hosted on YouTube. So just go ahead and watch those YouTube videos. And then, they're all there, so feel free to share them with co-teachers and other people in your district. I do want to quickly mention our weekly tech tips. We do have every Tuesday, we send out a short and sweet email about how to do something different with technology. So, and it's totally free. We don't spam you or anything like that. If you'd like to subscribe to that, feel free to visit this URL down at the bottom of your page. You can go ahead and put your name and your email address in there. And then once again, every Tuesday, you will receive an email in your inbox that talks about something different. Sometimes they're Google related and sometimes they're not, but they all have to do with technology in and out of the classroom. So feel free to take advantage of that. Lastly, we're going to go ahead and talk about the GEG of Northwest Ohio. Our GEG of Northwest Ohio, it stands for Google Educators Group. We host events throughout the whole state of Ohio. So following this website, right down here, this link, this does provide more information about all the events that we have. We have some events that are coming up yet this summer at different places throughout the state, and all of the events are totally free. So we have people that present and also people that attend. Of course, you can do both. And we just like to get people together to kind of share ideas and network a little bit. So if that's something that you're interested in, you can go ahead and visit that link and join our group if you'd like to, or just kind of go there and get some information. But like I said, we do have some events coming up yet this summer, and we would encourage you to go ahead and check that out. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started with our Google Forms Part 2 webinar. Again, we're going to talk about more advanced features about Google Forms and how to go ahead and do some quizzes and some extra things that this is just going to piggyback on Google Forms Part 1 webinar. So these are the topics we're going to talk about. Of course, we're going to start with the uses of Google Forms in education. And if you did sit through the Google Forms Part 1 webinar, these are the same examples that we talked about in Google Forms Part 1. But if you did not sit through that, or you're just kind of wondering, just some different things or different ways people are using Google Forms in education, I'm going to go ahead and visit those examples and hopefully kind of get some ideas flowing with how you would like to use Google Forms in the classroom. We are going to talk about, once again, those additional features. So we're going to talk about, first of all, inserting questions, but also inserting sections. And that is a little bit different than a question, and I'll explain, what the purpose is for that and how you can go ahead and do that. We'll talk about branching of questions, so how you can go ahead and provide or do that choose your own adventure type of form, or even do like a lesson of some sort. We're going to talk about how you can make your form a quiz. And then lastly, we're going to talk about add-ons. So if you're familiar with add-ons in Google Docs and Google Sheets, Google Forms also has add-ons. And so we're going to look at some of those that you can go ahead and add to kind of enhance your Google form. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and hop out of this presentation here in just a second. We are going to go ahead and hop into Google Forms, but before I do that, I do want to just talk very briefly about using forms in education, and I will show you some of those examples. So again, if you're kind of new to forms or you have a base understanding of forms, but you're looking to do more with it, I just want to kind of throw out some of these ideas of ways that other people have used forms in education. And first off, first one being surveying students' interests. So you can go ahead and first day of school, or maybe if you're, even for parents, if you're doing like an open house type of thing and you're just asking the parents about their children's interests, you can go ahead and provide a form and they can fill it out. Again, if you've used Google Forms before, that all of the answers, all of the submissions of a Google form does automatically go to a Google Sheet. And they're all time-stamped and dated, so it's really easy to kind of compile a whole bunch of information very quickly. We have had schools use Google Forms for voting. There may be voting for homecoming king, homecoming queen. So that's a really, great way to use a Google form. Assessment, entrance, and exit tickets. There are templates inside Google Forms that are already set up as far as being an exit ticket and an entrance ticket. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at those, and you'll see how you can go. You could still change them, of course, but you'll see how they're already kind of set up as a template. And if you like them the way that they are, then they're already going to be ready to go for you. You can gather parent volunteers, conference, sports signups. So if you want to do time slots, people can sign up for a time slot all through a Google form. Registration, we've had some school districts use Google Forms as a pre-registration for kindergarten or for, sports or something like that. So that's a really good example. And then my last example there, of course, there are many examples. This is just kind of a handful of them. But my last example there is collecting IEP data. So I've worked with a special education teacher that she created a Google form, and she sent the form out to her regular education teachers, gathering information about a student. And of course, that could be vice versa as well, just kind of gathering information about that to write the IEP, or maybe just to gather information so that the regular education teacher can go ahead and maybe level her lessons or activities or something like that. So lots of different ways that you can go ahead and use Google Forms. So these are just a couple examples of Google Forms that have been created, and I'll very quickly go through these. Again, if you sat through the Google Forms Part 1 webinar, these are the same examples that I used, but here's the evaluation. So I'll just really quickly visit this one here, and this is the evaluation that we currently use for all of our classes that we offer here at NWACA. And so this is a Google form. It goes through, asks some questions, and again, all of those results automatically go to a Google Sheet. So here's an example of voting for homecoming king. Of course, we can pick LeBron James or Adam Sandler, and then we can go ahead and go through homecoming queen. And then when you submit it, of course, that magic button down there, that's when it goes out to the Google Sheet, and the Google Sheet is where all those answers are collected. So here's just a really basic example of the IEP data. And this is an example of, and I mentioned before that like choose your own adventure form or like for a lesson. And what we're going to talk about in this Google Forms webinar is the fact that when you answer this, if the student is performing excellent and I click on next, this button may go to section 3 or section 5 of this form because I chose excellent. But if I chose average, maybe it's going to go to section 4 or section 2. So I can kind of, and we call that your choose your own adventure. Google calls it branching. And so basically you can click on an answer, and then based on the answer that you chose, your form will go to a different section. So I'm going to show you how to set that up within the Google Forms on the back end, and then you can go ahead and use that with your class or with your parents or, you know, whatever audience you may be doing this for. So that's a really neat one too. So let me just say leave. Okay, so registration form. So this is just an example. We use this for our Perrysburg GEG event where we had everybody register for our event. So of course this is just a form there. You'll also notice these red stars. Again, if you've never used Google Forms before, this red star here does indicate that that question is required. So you have to answer this question before you can click on submit. If you do not answer this question, your submit button will be grayed out and it will not allow you to submit it. So you need to go ahead and do that. All of these ones that have that red star, you do need to go ahead and click on that or answer them before you click on submit. CEU form, we'll click on this one really quickly. This is just another form that we've used in the past of collecting information for a CEU. So if they fill this out, then I actually have an add-on running on this. It's actually running through a Google Sheet. But what it does then is it collects all of this information and then it attaches it to the CEU. It's just a Google document, and then it automatically emails out that Google document to the person that filled this out. So basically, you know, this form collects the data, and then we have an add-on that kind of compiles all of it together with the Google Doc, and then it automatically emails it. So there's lots of neat things that you can do with Google Forms. So I'll go ahead and go to my next screen here. I am going to hop out of this presentation at this point, but I do want to quickly mention that when we record these webinars, I also put up the presentations that go hand in hand with the recording. So I just want to kind of circle through this really quick. There are some screenshots and just some information as far as you know, all the things that we're going to talk about within this webinar. So feel free to visit this presentation if you are viewing the recording, because it does have some screenshots and some information, as well as going to our training.nowaka.org website. That's where, again, we have that checklist where you can go ahead and watch different videos of how to do the different things within Google Forms. And then hopefully both of those things together can kind of get you going with doing some of those features within Google Forms. All right, so I'm in my Google Drive account and I'm in my test user. I have Wilma Flintstone over here in the corner. So she's my test user. And I'm going to go ahead and just create a new Google form. So just kind of as a refresher to creating a form, if I go to my blue new button, I can go down to this more menu and just select Google Forms. Now this will automatically bring up a Google form for me. I can go ahead and give it a name. I'll just name it Tech Survey here. And I can put in my question. So here's question 1, and I can go ahead and use that plus sign to add a new question. Now the first thing, and so I'll just click on this plus sign so that we have 2 questions. This first thing that I want to mention is this whole idea of creating sections. And so we're going to first visit the idea of how we can do branching. And so this is more like the choose your own adventure, or, you know, your answer or your section depends on how you answered the question. So right down here, it looks like a little equal sign. This is called your add section. And what this does, so I'm going to go ahead and click on it. What this does is it kind of like gives me a little page break. And so if you're thinking like back to a Google Doc, this may be section 1 and this may be section 2. Now I'll kind of define this a little bit as far as creating Google Forms. If you're using forms for assessment purposes, like let's just pretend, we'll go back and change our example. Let's just pretend that this is a quiz. This first section may be like multiple choice. The second question may be true, false. And then maybe section 3 might be a little bit different. So I can indicate those sections or indicate those page breaks as different parts of the assessment or different parts of the quiz. Now, if we flip our example back to the original idea, which was that choose your own adventure and the whole branching part of Google Forms, what now I can do is when I go up here, I can click on question 1, and right down here in the corner are 3 dots. Now, if I click on these 3 dots, I can turn on this feature where it says go to section based on answer. And so if I check this on. Now option 1, and of course I don't have anything filled in, but I will go ahead and show you a form that I already have, filled in. But if I click on option 1, it says continue to next section. Or maybe I want them to go to section 2, or maybe I want them to submit the form. Maybe they're done. And so I'll give you a scenario here. If this is the question 1 and here are your options or your answers, basically if your students or the users or the audience would click on answer A or click on this first one, it's going to do whatever you told it over here. So if you told it, I want you to go to section 2, then the next page or the next question that this user will get after selecting option 1 will be to go to section 2. Whereas down here, if I tell it, I want you to submit the form, then if my audience or my users or whoever it is that's taking this form, if they answer option 2, then it's going to automatically go to a page that allows them to submit the form. So that's where you can kind of make it non-linear and tell it your next question is based on what you answered previously. And so I'll throw out another couple examples before I hop into one that I've already done for you. Here's another example. Let's say that question 1 was a review question where, I'm asking them a question and I give them some different options. Well, since it's review, if they get the answer correct, maybe they go to the next section, which would be, learning about something different. If they get the answer wrong, maybe this one will have them go back and watch a page of a YouTube video or watch a page of, something for a review in which they get a little bit more review and then they're ready to go on to that next part. So you really, for Google Forms, we're going to talk about quizzes next, but you really can design these Google Forms as lots of different things. So you can go ahead and create a lesson where that would be like maybe you're reviewing or maybe they're going on to the next thing. You can do like a choose your own adventure where like if they choose one thing, then it, helps them go along one way, or if they choose something different, that lets them go along the other way. You could do a lot of different things with these. So I'm going to go ahead and really quickly and pull up an example that I already have filled out, and I'm going to show you how that example might be useful as far as using this type of branching or this choose your own adventure. So give me 1 second to go ahead and pull it up from my drive. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and open up this president's form. Now, this president's form, and of course I could go ahead and change the background and I can do all these different things that we talked about in the first Google Forms webinar, but what I want to point you to are these sections. And so this one right here, it says section 1 of 5. So what I've done already is I've just added, multiple sections. And then we're going to go ahead and just scroll down so we can see our first question. So this particular form, it says pick a president. This is a choose your own project form. You will pick one of the following presidents to answer questions about. You will also upload a Google Doc of your essay, use the first question to choose your president, and then follow the corresponding steps. So I'm in edit mode, so I'm not viewing this as a student would, but I'm just going to show you on the back end how that works. And then I'll go ahead and show you how it looks like as a student, like if the student was actually taking this form as an assessment or as a branching type of form. So it says pick your president. So Donald Trump. Now, what I've set this to do is I've gone through and I've added sections. So you saw me before in the other form add different sections, and I already turned this on where it says go to section based on answer. So now I've created a section. Section 2 is titled Donald Trump. Section 3 is titled Barack Obama. Section 4 is George W. Bush, and then Bill Clinton. I didn't finish Bill Clinton here, so Bill Clinton is going to Section 5, which is Bill Clinton. Now, I didn't completely finish this whole form, but you probably get the idea where if a student would answer Donald Trump, it would automatically have them go to this section of Donald Trump. So here's where I would want to go ahead and add questions. So I can go click on this plus sign and I'm going to add a question about Donald Trump, maybe add a second question about Donald Trump. And then I also can go ahead and add that file upload. That's where you can go ahead and upload a Google Doc of their essay, or a Google slideshow or anything like that. So you can go ahead and do that. But let me go back to this question 1. So where it says pick your own president, and each one of these is set to go to the corresponding section. And if I scroll down, I have Donald Trump, I have Barack Obama, George W. Bush, and then Bill Clinton is the last one. And so what I'm going to show you now, so once I've done this form, and once again, of course, I would want to go ahead and fill in questions about each president, but you get the idea how it works and how it's set up. Now, if I'm going to click on this little eyeball right up here, this allows me to preview this form as a viewer. So I can go ahead and see how this form is going to look like before I actually use it with my students. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And this is what you're going to see. Now, if you remember that example at the very beginning of this webinar where I talked about that IEP form, where if you clicked on, excellent, or if you clicked on average, or if you clicked on, low score or whatever, it would go to a different section based on your answer. And this form is going to do the same exact thing. So if I was a student and I said, pick your president, this is your choose your own project form, and you can go ahead and answer the question and then upload a Google Doc. So let's say this person wanted to choose George W. Bush. When I click on next, and notice how I'm going to scroll down here real quick, there's nothing else on this page. This is the only question on this page because this is the only question in section 1. If I had multiple questions in section 1, I can go ahead and see those, but this is the only question that I have, and then I'm telling it based on the answer that they choose, I want it to go to a different section. So I'm going to go ahead and click on next, and then it automatically goes to the George W. Bush section. And once again, I don't have any questions here, but you get the idea where I can go ahead and answer these questions. If I click on next again, and this is where we want to go back and change this because you notice what just happened. If I clicked on next again, what happens is it's going back to being linear, where George W. Bush was section 4 and Bill Clinton was section 5. So I actually want to go back to my form and change it because if they chose George W. Bush, I don't want them to also see Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton was the last one. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click back on this pencil right here and I'll say leave. Yes, I want to leave. So what I really need to do at this point is I need to add some questions to the different sections so that I can go ahead and make it so that if they answered, answer A versus answer B, then it would go to submit form or go to a different section, or I basically can tell it where to go. So I'm going to quickly go ahead and do that. And then, so now I have section 2. So I've just answered or asked a question, section 2, Donald Trump. Is this president Democrat or Republican? So my students would answer he is Democrat or he is Republican. And basically whatever they answer, I can have those answers go somewhere different. So for instance, if I go ahead and click on this at this point, now again, I'd have to go through and do this step where I click on those 3 dots and say go to section based on answers. So once I have that turned on, now I get the option where I can tell it where I want it to go. So again, notice that if I wanted to, I can add a 6th section or 7th, or, I can keep going. Or I can have it maybe go back to pick a president. Or maybe if I had a review, I can have it go back to a section that reviewed what does it mean to be Democrat? What does it mean to be Republican? So forth. But in my case, I'm just going to make this really simple. And if they click on Republican, I'm going to have it submit the form. And if they clicked on Democrat, I'm going to just have it submit the form. Once again, I could definitely add some more questions and add some more things and have them bounce all over the place if I wanted to. But I don't want them, if they go to Donald Trump, I don't want them to see Barack Obama and then George W. And I don't want them to see everything. I just want them to see only the questions pertaining to the president that they picked. So I'm just going to have it submit and then submit. Now what I've done really quickly is I actually took this question and I duplicated it using this button right here. So I duplicated it and then I just moved it so that I can have it down here for Barack Obama. And then notice how again it says submit form, and then I duplicated it again, and then I can have it down for George W. Bush, submit form. Of course, again, I can continue to add questions if I want to. But then lastly, the fifth fifth section, Bill Clinton, is this president Democrat or Republican? Democrat, Republican, and then I have, another test question in there too. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to make sure that these all have question marks here because this is a question. So I'll go ahead and just ask or put these question marks in here. But know that, again, if I create a question in any of these sections, I can go ahead and just use that duplicate button and then just go ahead and move it by grabbing the dots up here, right here, and then move it wherever I want to move it into different sections if I wanted to. But in my case, once again, I'm just going to keep it up here for Donald Trump. So let's go ahead and view this form once again and see how this changes. So I'm going to preview this form as a viewer, and I'm going to use that same example that I used before. So I'm going to pretend that my answer was George W. Bush. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And then I'm going to click on next. And so now I have a question. Again, I would want to fill this in, but now I have a question that says, is this president Democrat or Republican? So let's say that I chose Republican. What I need to do at this point is because I chose Republican, I can go ahead and click on next. And now it automatically bumps me to click submit. Remember how before when I clicked on when I went to that section, it just kept going to the next section. Like it did not understand that that was the only section that I wanted to visit. So remember that if you want to go ahead and have it automatically jump to submit, you do have to put that in to go to section based on answer or go to submit based on answer. Now, if I didn't want that, if I clicked on back, because you may be wondering what happens if you click on back, it does not go back to Bill Clinton, which was the very last section that I had. Rather, it goes back to whatever question I wanted them to go to, Republican. Now, if I scroll down just a little bit, if I hit back again, it does bounce me back to the very beginning. So because you put those stoppers in, if you will, or the branching in, it makes it take a path that's not linear by the form. So you can kind of bounce wherever you want to, but just make sure, and I'm going to click on my little pencil here, just make sure that you go ahead and tell it where to go based on, make it go to a certain section based on the answer. So remember that first step by click on the dots right here, go to section based on answer, and make sure these are all filled in for each question or each section, because otherwise you might run into the fact where somebody might go back or forward and not reach the correct spot. So that's a really neat part about Google Forms. Again, that's called branching. You can also call it choose your own adventure, where you can kind of not go linear. I mean, you can make it non-linear and create a path that, maybe is a little bit different than question 1, question 2, question 3, those consecutive questions. So really neat. Again, just called branching. You can make any form do that branching just by clicking on go to section based on answer. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and go back to my, I'm just going to click on another screen here. Here's my president's form. And the next part that I'm going to talk about while we're talking about projects and branching and all these different things, we're going to move into the whole quiz option. So off to the top, we talked about our color palette in the first Google Forms webinar. We've previewed as a viewer. We also talked briefly in our first Google Forms webinar about some of the settings. The quiz option is actually under the settings gear. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that little gear. And we talked about in our first Google Forms webinar, we talked about the general, where we can go ahead and restrict it to, your domain users, limit to one response. We talked about presentation, where maybe you're shuffling the question order or showing the progress bar. Here is the quizzes option. So I'm going to go ahead and click on quizzes. And right up here is this little slider. So if I want to make this a quiz, I can go ahead and slide the slider over, and now I get some options. So some of these options include releasing the grade. So if you want to release the grade immediately after each submission, in other words, if a student submits their quiz or their form, they will immediately see their grade. Or if you as the teacher would rather manually review it, maybe you have some essay questions in there, or maybe there were some fill in the blank questions where you want to check their spelling and you want to make sure that it is marked wrong for a reason, or it's correct for a reason, or something like that. You can go ahead and do that. And then you also have some other options down here where it says respondents, or the the audience, the students, can see the missed questions or even the correct answers. So some teachers prefer that they don't like this because maybe they might email it to their friends or, take a screenshot or something like that. So they uncheck that. And then, missed questions, again, that's your personal preference. What I'm going to do at this point, though, is I'm going to hop out of this president's form, and I'm actually going to go back to my drive. I'm going to open up this weather quiz form that I have, and I'm going to go ahead and set this up as a quiz. And so that way we can kind of see how it works. I'm going to have a student, or I'm going to masquerade as a student so you can see how that works, and then we'll see how it works with the grading. So here's my weather quiz form where the first question is email address and what is your name, and then who is your teacher, and then we just have a couple questions. Of course, you can go ahead and bring in or any type of question. There's also an add-on in Docs that is called Doc to Form, where if you have a quiz already prepared in a Google Doc, you can go ahead and quickly move all of those questions into be a Google form so that it's ready to go, if that's something that you want to do, or you can just go ahead and create your questions either way. But let me go ahead and take this weather quiz form, and I'm going to go up to my settings tab. Now I'm going to click on quizzes, and this is actually already over where it says make this a quiz. And so I have this set where it says release the grades immediately after each submission. However, you can go ahead and change this, and then you can go ahead and change these too. But I'm going to leave it the way it is, and I'm going to click on save. And so what happens is, here's my email address, what is your name, who is your teacher. What happens right here, because this is multiple choice, I'm going to go ahead and click one time on this question, and notice what appears down at the bottom where it says answer key. Now once again, this is already clicked on, I've already selected these answers, but here's my answer key. And so right now you're going to go ahead and you're going to tell Google Forms what is the correct answer, because it's going to go ahead and automatically grade it, but it's only going to grade it based on the answers that you provided. So temperature can be measured as, and we're going to say both A and B is the correct answer. Now notice how you also, and you don't have to do this, but you also can give feedback. So right here it says feedback for correct answers. So if they answer this, they get a little feedback that says great job. And then if they answer the wrong answer, it says please visit the online textbook that talks about temperature. Here's the link. So you can put links in there too. And so we'll look a little bit more deeply at that, but just so you know, that is possible. Of course, you do want to give it a point value if you wanted to grade it. And then this answer just kind of goes up and down depending on how many points you want to give it. So I'll just scroll down here again, and if I click on edit question right down here, this does give me the ability to go ahead and go back and change the question if I want to go ahead and do that. And then I can go ahead and click on answer key again, and this is where I get all of that extra, features as far as feedback and the correct answer and so forth. Here's my pencil to edit that feedback, where I can go ahead and give it feedback for a correct answer or incorrect answer. Here is that link option that I can go ahead and put a link in there if I want them to go out to a website to review what that question is, or, maybe our online textbook or something like that. Again, you don't have to do that. That's just an added feature that you could add. So I'm going to scroll down to my second question. What element is used to measure how cold or hot the weather is? And then once again, I already have that correct answer checked because I clicked on answer key, so I selected temperature. This one does not have answer feedback provided yet, so I can go ahead if I wanted to and just go ahead and click on add answer feedback, and this is where I can just go ahead and enter my feedback. So correct answer will say great job, and then maybe incorrect, we'll just say great job here, and then maybe incorrect, maybe we'll say research and try again or something like that. Research and try again. And then maybe I do want to provide some sort of link. I can go ahead and we'll just say google.com. We'll just be really simple. We'll just say Google, but you can go ahead and add your online textbook, or you can go ahead and add, any kind of website or WebQuest or something that you've been studying. So I'm going to go ahead and click on save. And so now both of my questions do have feedback already in there. So again, I put 10 points here. This is just a little thing. I could even highlight this and just say 20 points if I wanted to. That's, a text box that I can go ahead and do. And I want to unselect that. I don't want that to be the correct answer. All right, so my quiz is ready to go. I've put my questions in. I've selected my correct answers just by clicking on that answer key down at the bottom of my page. And now I'm ready to masquerade as a student. So I'm going to click on this little eyeball right up at the top of my page. That's my preview. So right now I'm going to pretend to be a student. So I'm just going to pretend that I'm masquerading as Fred Flintstone. And so what is my name? Here's Fred. Who is your teacher? We'll say Wilma. And then down here, I'm ready to go with my quiz. And so right away, it's going to tell me how many points it is. So I'm going to go ahead. Let's say I'll get this one correct. And let's say I'm going to get this one incorrect. And so right now, I'm going to click submit. Now remember those settings that I had already selected in my quiz, where I had it automatically give me a grade of some sort. So I'm going to click on submit. And it says your response has been recorded. Now look down here, it says view your score or submit another response. And of course I can uncheck this. Maybe I don't want them to do this, of course. So that's just in that settings in that gear. So I'm gonna click on view my score. So it says your total points were 5 out of 25. So it tells me my email address, what is my name, who is your teacher, and then it tells me some feedback based on what I've chosen. And then down here as well, I got it wrong. So research and try again. And now I can click on Google and it will go out to Google. It's just going to follow that link that I've provided. So now I can do more research and maybe try my quiz again. So I can go ahead and allow that. Now, the other option for this, like let's say you were like, I really don't like that. I don't want my students seeing their grade right away. And, I want to be able to manually go ahead and review everything. So now I'm going to go ahead and whoops, I'm in the president's one. I don't want to do that. I'm going to go back to my weather quiz. So let me close that. I'll go back to weather quiz right up here. And now I'm going to go back to settings, and I do want to change that. So I'm going to go back to quizzes, and I'm going to say later after manual review. So it turns on email collection, because what that means is if you do not have a question in there that says, what is your email address? It will automatically collect the email address of the user. And you want that to happen. That's a good thing, because otherwise you won't really know who might be taking that quiz if you're going to manually collect it and then they're going to send out the grades later. So they will send it out via email, so you want to make sure that the email address is in there. All right, so let's go ahead and check this out. I'm going to click on save here. And now I'm going to go back up to my preview, because I want to preview this as a student. And I'm going to just masquerade as a student. So let's type in, let's say Mickey Mouse right now. And then what is your name? So Mickey. Who is your teacher? Wilma. And then I'm going to go ahead and answer these questions. So let's get this one wrong. And then the second question, we'll go ahead and we'll get this one right. So now I'm going to click on submit. So this is what it says. Because it is selected for manual review, all it says is your response has been recorded. And make sure, please note that you can change this. You can make this be whatever you want to. I just didn't do that yet. This is called your confirmation message, so you can go ahead and put whatever you want in there. Again, you don't have to have this in there too. That's all part of those settings under that gear where I can go ahead and change that. But this is what the student would see. The student would see no indication of any grade or any responses or anything like that. So on the teacher side, so I'm going to go ahead, we'll close this up. I'm going to go back to Wilma. And so Wilma now has 2 responses. And so just like any normal form, I can go ahead and click on responses, and I can see a summary, and I can also see the individual. And so right here where it says summary, it's going to show me the average, the median, the range, all these things. And then I can kind of see all this stuff. So Fred Flintstone, his score was released on that day and time because it was automatically released when Fred clicked on submit. This one, Mickey Mouse, was not released because I wanted that to be a manual review. And Mickey did. I still see the grades as the teacher, but Mickey hasn't seen the grades at all, where Fred has. And so once again, I can kind of scroll down and I can see all these different things. And this is the same for any form that you do. It's going to give you these nice charts and graphs and so forth of where you can go ahead and see these responses. Now, if I'm ready to release the grades, I can stay on my responses tab right here. You can scroll down just a little bit, and anybody's score that is not released, of course, I would want to go to my spreadsheet and view it and, make sure that if I want to change any of the point values and so forth or give them credit, I can go ahead and do that. But when I'm ready to release the scores, I can just click on release scores. I can create a message if I'd like to, and this will send them that email. And so if you remember back when I said for manual review, they do put an email question in there if it's not already there that says, what is your email? Because this is how the students then receive their grades, is by email. And Google Forms will automatically do that for you. So I'm going to go ahead and say send emails and release. And so now it will show that the score has been released at whatever time that I told it. And so just by clicking that release scores, then it will go ahead and do that. And, once again, here are the scores that were in there, but I could have gone through and manually changed them or added a couple of points if maybe they just misspelled something or whatnot, just by going up to that spreadsheet and then making sure that, I've overridden any scores that Google might have missed or something like that. So that's the nice thing about that manual review, is that you can go ahead and do it. Now, what I do want to point out is, if you noticed, Fred Flintstone did go through, and he got an immediate grade right away, but yet I was also able then to manually review it, and I could still send out an email to Fred. So maybe he got an immediate feedback, but then I still went back manually and maybe gave him a couple more points and then released his score. Of course, I didn't change anything, but you could have changed something, and then his new score would have been sent through via email. So it's not like if you pick one, you cannot pick the other. You can still kind of do both, more or less, and just manual review it, and then decide if you want to give the students some extra points or take off more points or whatever the case may be, and then release the scores again. So all of these things are this quiz feature of Google Forms, just by clicking on quizzes, and then you can go ahead and click any option here, but then under responses, this is where all that extra stuff is, where then you can go ahead and release the score. So really neat feature of Google Forms. Okay, so the last part, and I'm actually going to throw in something extra as well. So I should say the second to last part of what we're going to go ahead and talk about, and I'll open this again. We're going to go ahead and talk about add-ons. And if you remember at the very beginning of this webinar, I mentioned that add-ons are there. Now, I do a separate webinar all about add-ons for Google Forms. So I'm just going to talk about a couple in this one, but know that you can go ahead and go out to add-ons and install any kind of add-ons that you want to add on functionality to your Google form. So I'm going to preface with the fact that, and if you're following along, I'm going to preface with the fact that all your add-ons are under this puzzle piece. Now, if you're looking at your screen and you're saying, well, gee, Christy, I don't have that puzzle piece there, more probably you don't have any add-ons installed yet. And so to go ahead and do that, you can click on these three dots here in the corner, and you can go down to add-ons. When you go down to add-ons, here's where you can go ahead and search for any add-on that you might want to install. And so, for instance, GMath is a really good one. If you're a math teacher, this allows you to do math functions within your Google form. So if you're going to set up questions that have to do with math expressions, this is a good one to go ahead and add. There's lots of different add-ons here, and I'll tell you some of my favorites. I'll go up. Choice Eliminator 2 is a nice one. This will go ahead and put different choices, like for conferences, for instance. If I had 5 o'clock, 5:30, 6 o'clock, 6:30, when someone chooses like 5:30, then it will be erased from the list when the next person comes in and tries to pick a time. So that's a neat one. Form limiter is another neat one that this will, and I'll hop out of here just for a second so I can tell you something about form limiter. If I click on responses here, this is a slider that says accepting responses. And so right now it's turned on where it automatically is accepting responses. If I wanted to go ahead and say, okay, quiz time is over, it's 3 o'clock or whatever, I want to turn it off, I can manually go ahead and turn this off, and then it says not accepting responses. Whereas if anybody tries to visit this form, they might see see the questions, they just won't be able to submit any responses. And so with that said, this add-on here, we'll go back to my add-ons menu. This add-on here, Form Limiter, it does automatically shut off that Google form, so you don't have to go to that slider. It will automatically turn off the Google form after a max number of responses have been recorded, or at a certain date and time. So you can say at 3 o'clock on, Thursday, I want this form turned off, and then anybody that didn't submit it then won't be able to submit it anymore. So that's a really neat one. And like I said, I do a whole webinar just on add-ons, so I'm not going to go too far in depth with add-ons, but just kind of know that this is where they all are. And they're really neat if you just kind of read through them. There's a whole bunch of different ones that are here and that are available for you to use. So those are kind of some of the ones that I use. I'll click on this X here. Once you have them installed, so once I click on add-ons and I install them, now under my puzzle piece, here they are. And so these are the ones that kind of are my favorites. I talked about Choice Eliminator 2 and Form Limiter. GMath we talked about as well. Form Recycler is a neat one. If you're creating a quiz in Google Forms and you maybe have 2 other quizzes in Google Forms already created, Form Recycler actually allows you to go out to those other quizzes and grab questions from them and then go ahead and put together a Google form based on other quizzes that you might have done in the past. So it kind of recycles the previous forms that you might have used. And then Check It Out is a nice one. If you have like a Chromebook cart that you share for the district or for the building, you can like check it out and then check it back in. Basically, you're selecting, I want Chromebook cart 1, and then it's checked out. It goes under like the checked out part of the form, and then you can go ahead and check it back in when you check it back into the library. So really neat ways that you can go ahead and use Google Forms. Of course, it's going to record all this in that spreadsheet. No matter what add-on you use, everything goes back to that spreadsheet. But it will automatically do some of those features for you based on what add-on you might have chosen. So just some really neat things. Again, if you're familiar with add-ons, if you use them in Google Docs and Google Sheets, this is kind of along the same lines where you can go ahead and add that or use them in Google Forms also, but it's a little bit different of how you get them. You want to make sure you go to add-ons over here, and then you can go ahead and start the add-on or run the add-on from this puzzle piece. So really neat there. All right, I'm keeping an eye on time. There's one last thing that I want to talk about, and then we'll kind of wrap things up. And the last thing that I want to talk about is, and this is kind of an add-on to the agenda, is the fact that Google Forms does have templates that are already created for you that you can go ahead and use. Now with these templates, I will say that you can use them as is, or you can go ahead and change them. And how you get to these templates, one easy way, if you're already inside of a form, you can go ahead and just click on this back button right here, which is called the Forms Home. So if I click on this, it's going to default me back to the Forms Home. And what you're going to notice is it defaults to the template gallery. So I have blank quiz, exit ticket, assessment, worksheet. And if I click on these down arrows right here, I'm going to see all, whoops, I went to our NOWACA and we don't have anything in there. I want to make sure I'm on general. I can see all the templates that are already there. And so I have a party invite forms template. I have a t-shirt sign up. This is a neat one if you guys are ordering t-shirts for like a spirit day or, volleyball or basketball or something that's already created in there. Here's feedback, customer feedback, time off, job application, all kinds of things. Now, again, you can go ahead and change these. So I'm going to go ahead and open up this exit ticket right here. And this is a real popular form that people use for exit tickets. And so this background is already there. Of course, you can go ahead and change that using this little color palette up there. But it's already typed out for you. If I don't like this, or if I want to add an extra question, I can just use my buttons over here, just like I would if I was creating a brand new form from scratch. I can go ahead and add a question, and I can move it anywhere I want to, and I can go ahead and add to my exit ticket, and then it will be ready to go. So a lot of people don't know that these templates are available, so I wanted to just make sure that I added that into this webinar, because maybe that might save you some time in using some different forms, and hopefully allow you to use forms a little bit more. So keep that in mind, template gallery. And then of course, anything you do in Google Forms, when you're doing it, it's automatically saving in your Google Drive account. So you don't have to worry, even if I click on assessment and I forget to save it, remember it's saving automatically for you. So then this assessment form will be inside my Google Drive automatically for me so that I can go ahead and go back to it later and edit it or send it out. Remember, of course, to send it out, I'm going to click on that send button. And one of the easiest ways is just by using that link. All right, so lots of different things with Google Forms. Hopefully this has provided you with more advanced features of how you can go ahead and implement Google Forms inside your classroom. And I really like that new quiz feature for Google Forms. It really makes it really slick as far as putting that answer key in there and then having it automatically grade it for you. All right, I'm going to hop back to my presentation here. And once again, when this is uploaded to the internet or to our training.nowaka.org site, know that you can go back and view this presentation as well as, looking at our resources on our training.nowaka.org website. But I'm going to go ahead and end with this last slide, which of course is thank you for attending our webinar, our Google Forms Part 2 webinar. If you'd like to get involved with our Google Educators group, there's the link to go ahead and visit so you can go ahead and read up some information more on the group and possibly attend one of our events. We would love to see you. If you'd like a copy of this presentation, here's the link for that. Our Tuesday Tech Tips are right there. And then also our CEU information. If you are attending this webinar, you will get an email, an evaluation email shortly. We usually say 24 hours. It'll be by tomorrow morning in your inbox. Once you fill out that evaluation, you can go ahead and get your CEU certificate just by filling out your name and your email address and so forth. That CEU certificate will then be automatically emailed to you. You'll find it in your inbox. So thank you again for attending, and we hope to see you at the next webinar.